Track motion is a feature of both Vegas Pro and Movie Studio Platinum. It's applied at track level and affects the whole track it's applied to. These are the kind of things you can do with track motion. You can scale the frame upwards or downwards. The scaling can be aspect ratio locked, where scaling doesn't cause any squashing or stretching of the frame, or the aspect ratio can be ignored. You can move the frame horizontally or vertically. You can even move the frame off the display. All these actions can be keyframed to allow complex animations to take place over time. In this tutorial, I'll take you through the Track Motion Properties window and explain the parameters. I'll then show you how easy it is to create a collage of images using this handy tool. Track motion may seem a little daunting at first. Once you get to grips with the basics, it becomes an easy tool to use. Welcome to this, my 30th tutorial. Okay, I'm going to start by pulling one of these images down onto track number 1. I now want to open up track motion for this track. If you can't see the track motion icon on the track header, click the hamburger menu button, go down to Edit Visible Button Set and put a check mark in track motion. That will place the track motion icon on each track header. I'll open up track motion for this track. This is the properties for that particular track. Now I want to go through all these parameters one at a time, starting with this one. As it says, this icon, this button, prevents scaling in the Y direction. When it's enabled, highlighted like that, that stops me from scaling this box in the Y direction. I will just grab this corner and try and pull it down. You can see that although it's scaling in the X direction, it's not scaling in the Y direction. If I release that, then that will allow me to scale in both directions because they're both disabled. This icon here, as it said, scale about center. As you could see there, when I'm scaling, the center stays static. If I release that icon, the scaling doesn't scale around the center. I'll just enable that again. This icon here is lock aspect ratio. That makes sure that the aspect ratio of the box stays the same no matter how I scale it. As you can see that it always stays 16:9 or whichever aspect ratio is set. If I disable that one, then I can scale it any way I want. I'll just set that back on. Two icons here, prevent movement Y and prevent movement X. At the moment they're both disabled, so that allows me to move that frame anywhere I want. If I enable the prevent movement Y, I can't move it vertically. I can move it horizontally. If I disable that and enable that one, I can move it vertically, but I can't move it horizontally. This is handy when you're doing fine adjustments to make sure that the box doesn't wander in a way that you don't want it to wander. This next one here, edit in object space, that I won't be covering because that's beyond the scope of this tutorial. The next one, enable snapping. If I enable that, then the movement snaps to these grid points here. That's handy for getting very precise movements. I'll just take that off. The next one is enable rotation. This is normally enabled by default so that you can grab that and rotate. If I disable that, then it takes away the ability to rotate that. Now this drop down box here, this is way beyond the scope of this tutorial, so I'm going to leave that at source alpha. Now these parameters down the left hand side, fairly self-explanatory. This is the position of this frame. X and Y coordinates, width of the frame and height of the frame. You can see if I move that, the X coordinate moves and the Y coordinate moves. And if I just grab that, you can see that the width and the height are changing. The orientation again is the rotation. This rotation parameter box, if I change that, it changes the position, the default position of the frame. And I can also change the X offset. And the Y offset. You can see that the center of rotation there moves up and down when I change the Y offset. And horizontally when I change the X offset. keyframe parameters here I won't deal with because I'm not dealing with keyframes in this tutorial. The workspace, self-explanatory. The workspace is this space here, the total space. You can change the zoom level. And the X and Y offsets. The snap settings, these are to do with the grid spacing. I can change the grid spacing, and I can change the way that the rotation is affected by the grid. Now if I right click inside the box, I get a context menu where I can restore the view, which restores the workspace to its normal default parameters. If I click restore box, then that will set this box to its default parameters. Similarly, restore rotation will put the rotation to default. That's already at default, so it won't show. And similarly, restore size, restore center will do the same thing. Some other options, if I click flip horizontal, you'll see that the scene has flipped. And flip vertical, and again. So I'll just restore the box there back to normal. It's generated a keyframe there, so I'll just delete that keyframe. Two little icons here. Magnification icon will, if I click on that and drag it, it will reduce and increase the magnification. And this icon here changes the workspace. Two options here. Again, I'll not be dealing with these because this is simply an introduction. The icon here, sync cursor, ensures that if you move this cursor, the timeline cursor moves as well in synchronization. The icons here are to do with keyframing, so I'll not deal with those. Okay, so I think that's all the parameters in this parameter box dealt with. So we'll get on to creating a collage. Just close that down for the time being. And what I want to do is pull all these down onto tracks. These are all images, but they could equally as well be video clips. The first thing I want to do is to change this one, the top track. We'll make sure that scale about center is enabled and lock aspect ratio is enabled, because I don't want the image to change dimensions at all, apart from being scaled. I'll grab a corner and I will pull it in until I get to the required size, and then move it to where I want it to be. About there. Close that down for a minute. What I want to do now is give it a border effect. So if I open the plugin chooser and pick Vegas border, okay, I want to give it a beveled border. I want the angle to be 45 and the size to be 0.050. Now you can see it's giving it a nice beveled border there. The next thing I want to do is open track motion for the next track and do the same for that. Resize it. If it gets too small like this, you can always scroll with your mouse to increase the size. Move that. To about there. Make it a little bit bigger, I think. Now I want to make a border on this, so what I can do, instead of going through the process of applying the border effect, I can right click on that. First copy, there it is. And then select that, right click on that and say selectively paste event attributes. And I can then say video event effects and effect keyframes, put a check mark in there and say OK, and that will copy the video effect to that event. I'll close that down, open up track motion for that one and do the same again. Maybe I just want to put that at a little jaunty angle. Okay, and do the same with that. Copy. And that's track 3. Selectively paste event attributes. Okay. The next one, pull that to the beginning. By the way, you'll notice that where the image is in relation to the other images depends upon where it is in this hierarchy. So that's something you need to be aware of when you're creating the collage. Okay, and the last thing to do is I think I'll leave the background image full and just copy the, or paste the border effect onto it. Okay, there you are. quick and simple way of producing a collage. Not very elegant, but I'm sure you'll do better. Well, that concludes this short introduction to track motion. It's a very powerful feature, and I do urge you to experiment with it. You'll soon realise how powerful it is. As always, please consider subscribing to my channel, and I welcome any comments you may have. Until the next time, bye for now.